U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are expected to talk on the phone on Tuesday to discuss Washington's plan for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Kyiv has already agreed to the proposal, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Putin is dodging the ceasefire proposal to prolong the war. Many ordinary Ukrainians also remain skeptical that the U.S. plan will lead to peace.
Recovering from injuries to return to the front as soon as possible. At this health center behind the front line in Ukraine, soldiers are anything but confident about a potential ceasefire with Russia.
If so far Putin hasn't accepted the ceasefire proposal, I'm not sure he will. I don't know what to say. All I can think about is healing this wound and going back to the front.
At the front, the situation for Ukraine is getting more and more complicated. Russian forces have pushed most of Ukraine's soldiers out of Russia's Kursk region. Now, fearing a Russian counterattack, Ukraine is evacuating locals near its border with Kursk, making a ceasefire even more critical for Kyiv.
For a week now, Putin has been unable to squeeze out yes to the ceasefire proposal. He's saying whatever he wants, but not what the whole world wants to hear.
The Russian president tentatively supported the ceasefire proposal, though stressed there are crucial conditions that need to be worked out. Ahead of a call with Vladimir Putin, U.S. President Donald Trump said many elements of a final deal on Ukraine have been agreed to, but much still remained to be discussed.
We're going to have a very important call. You know, we've had calls, but we're getting down to a very critical stage. And we want to get the whole Russia-Ukraine thing done. And I think Ukraine wants it. I know they want it. Everybody wants it. It's tremendous death. The bloodshed is unbelievable, like few people have ever seen before.
And while the leaders attempt to find middle ground, soldiers on the front line have no choice but to leave their lives at the mercy of politicians.
And for more on this, we can speak with DW's former Moscow bureau chief, Yuri Reshetto. Yuri joins us from Riga, where our Moscow team relocated after DW was banned from reporting in Russia. Yuri, good to see you. What can we expect from today's phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin?
Well, Nicole, let me start with the, let's say, positive thing. Both Putin and Trump want to talk personally, and they want to talk how to end the war in Ukraine, obviously, even though the Kremlin didn't confirm this topic, but that's nothing unusual for the Kremlin. And there are concrete proposals on the table this time, and this is where the difficulties begin. Everyone claims they want peace. Ukraine, anyway, President Zelenskyy has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. President Trump, because he promised the world an end to the war, his tactic seems to be first let the weapons be silent for at least 30 days and then work out a peace plan step by step. The only strange thing is that Trump has already made his negotiation points public before the negotiations have begun. As an experienced negotiator, you don't really do that. But okay, but what does Putin want? Peace? He claims yes, but at what price?
You mentioned it there. When presented with the ceasefire plan, Putin said he had questions, and he did lay those out. What are the sticking points then? What are Russia's demands?
Well, Putin basically said he welcomed the ceasefire, but it was a yes, but. Yes, he also wants peace, but he doesn't want a short peace for 30 days, but a lasting one, and he wants security guarantees. Okay, everyone wants lasting peace, and Ukraine also wants security guarantees, but from NATO, and that's the problem. Putin fears that Ukraine could use the time during the ceasefire to rearm militarily, which is why he is calling for Ukraine to disarm. Ukraine should also become neutral and forget the idea of joining NATO. Now, this was taboo for Putin from the very start. He now has an ally in the White House, by the way, White House. On this point, Trump also rules out Ukraine joining NATO. And then Putin asks, and there I have to agree with him for once, who, how and with what legal framework should guarantee the ceasefire. We are talking about a huge area over several hundred kilometers. The Russians don't accept European soldiers as peacekeepers on Ukraine. Other proposals are not known, however.
Does Donald Trump then have the power to convince Putin to agree to a deal on the same terms as Ukraine, that is? Or is Putin plainly just buying time here, Yuri?
Well, let's put it that way. Trump is a businessman who is obviously used to solving problems pragmatically and not talking about them for long. And he's used to taking action. We just heard him say in the report, we want to get the whole Russia-Ukraine thing done. He therefore probably has certain economic incentives in his pocket, attractions for Putin, such as access to rare earths in Ukraine, access to the Black Sea, or access to Ukrainian nuclear power plants. After all, he spoke on land and power plans that he wants to discuss with Putin. In other words, it will be about Ukrainian territories that the Russians now are occupying. What Trump apparently does not understand is that Putin is less interested in power plants than in a completely different security architecture, security structure in Europe, especially on Russia's borders. And the pro-Western and pro-NATO Ukraine is a disturbing factor here that needs to be changed by all means from his perspective. But on the other hand, Nicole, we shouldn't forget that the Russian economy and Russian banks are suffering from the US sanctions, from the Western sanctions. And also Russian men are dying on the front line. And these could prompt Putin to make certain concessions after all.
That was Yuri Roshetto from Riga. Thanks so much.